So with the first UFC Paramount card happening exactly 3 weeks today, I thought I'd make a video about UFC casuals and what makes a UFC casual, because we're probably going to get a lot more of them since the UFC is now partnering with Paramount. Obviously, Paramount Plus has you can watch movies on it, so there'll be people who already pay for it who then tune into the UFC, and it will spawn this new wave of casuals. We had the what was it? It was like the McGregor casuals. That was like kind of first wave. Then you got the I guess you the ESPN Plus casuals or the COVID casuals when when everyone was boosting the UFC because of COVID. And now we have the next wave, the third wave, I guess you could call it, of Paramount Plus casuals about to storm the UFC community, I guess you could say, or the MMA community in general. So I've got a couple of topics about casuals, about what makes a casual. So I'm going to go through them. I'm going to discuss what I think and my opinions on it. And in the comments, you guys can agree, disagree, say what you want. But before we go into it, please leave a like, subscribe. It really helps out. And yeah, let's go. So the first topic I thought I would do was a fan that gets his knowledge from Joe Rogan. So we all know this casual. He is like he watches the UFC from Joe Rogan. Like he maybe watches Joe Rogan religiously, and maybe he'll watch the UFC. And when he does, he always say Joe Rogan's one-liners. You know when you're watching a pay-per-view, Joe Rogan's on the commentary desk, and he's talking about the arm bars and the steel cups. That steel cup might help an arm bar. What else? Pereira with the he's a marauder and all that stuff, and it's like, and then or like what is it? A guy who's like really good at jiu-jitsu, and Joe Rogan will like gas him up. Like I don't know if you remember the Ryan Hall versus Ilia Topuria, and Ryan Hall's just rolling about the floor, and Joe Rogan's acting as if he's about to do like some dark magic on Topuria, and then Topuria just knocks him out. But simply because it was like he's like this guy does not want to go to the ground with Ryan Hall and stuff like that. And what else? He'll like call back to like a bunch of old fighters, like Joe Rogan, because he's like an old head, I guess you could say. He's like a UFC old head. He always knows all the old fighters, all the old names, because he has been in the company for ages. Maybe some casual fans will know about it, but his knowledge is very outdated, and that will translate to a lot of casual fans who just watch it simply because of Joe Rogan. That's kind of like, I don't know, like the people who watch Joe Rogan, they're special. The people who actually watch like everyday Joe Rogan, they're like a special type of person. It's a type of I don't know, just like American kind of what is it? Don't eat seed oils, and I I cut my steak on a wooden board or cutting board, a wooden cutting board, and beef tallow and all that stuff. Black Rifle Coffee. So yeah, that's what I think of this topic. So yeah, a lot of people do get their knowledge from Joe Rogan, and it does make them casual because Joe Rogan nowadays he is turning into a casual himself. As I said, he is very outdated. He barely cares about the sport anymore. He he's only there for the pay-per-views. He doesn't really know people's names. He's like a multi what? He's got worth like what, $200 million. I think he's really gonna give a shit that much? Not really. I doubt it. Anyway, next topic, has never trained. So you get a casual who maybe will watch the UFC, but they've never trained, so they can't really they don't really have a proper opinion. Say, for example, or the biggest thing I could say is maybe when it's grappling. So when there's like grappling, someone who has never trained grappling or has no insight towards it will just get like, call it boring, call it like, stand them up and all that stuff, even towards like I don't know, kickboxing, stuff like that, like the stand-up part of MMA. If you don't know anything about it, if you've never trained, you're not gonna know what you're talking. Like you're not gonna know what's gonna happen. You can't really have an insight towards it. You can't really predict. Say you have two fighters and one's a grappler, one's a striker, or not really that, but more like when they are, or that's a bad example, but when say two fighters are striking or two fighters are grappling, they can't really they'll just say whatever comes out of their mouth. They have no idea what they're talking about. We've all been there. You know someone who will see a fight, they'll think about something, they'll just whatever comes out of their mouth first, and they've never trained and they just have no idea what they're talking about. It's like they'll say the most like stupidest move ever, and they think that's gonna work or whatever. But yeah, so people who have never trained will have no idea what they're talking about. Uh, yeah, because it's like trying to talk about any other sport. Think of a sport you've never trained in, and you just start trying to name stuff about it, name techniques, name whatever about it, and you just have a bad time. It's the same idea with MMA. So the next topic I've got is only watches big events. So fighters, or not rather fighters, UFC casuals that only watch big events. So this would be, I'm gonna kind of put this in another category as well, like fans who only know big names. This is kind of they kind of correlate. Obviously, big names will be in the big events. So you have like McGregor, you have Pereira, you have Topuria, you have Makachev. If they're only watching those fights, they're a casual. I'm gonna say something first as well. This really only applies to for example, this mainly applies to American viewers because American viewers they have like even if it's a fight night, say if it's a fight night or maybe if it's a weaker pay per view, if they're like a true fan, they're probably gonna watch it unless it's like an absolute terrible fight night card like Apex card or something. I get it, don't watch it, who cares? But if it's like a pay per view and you're in America, you should be kind of watching most of them regardless of who's fighting because you've got the proper start time. If there's a terrible fight card and you're anywhere else other than America or like a decent time zone for the UFC, you don't need to watch it. Like it's there's no point staying up till 4 a.m. if you're gonna watch I don't know fucking some flyweight title fight or whatever, right? Or like I don't know who would be a good example. I don't know. Everyone's kind of good. The title fights are all kind of good now, but only watches big events. Yeah, so if they're just watching, like I just said, McGregor, Topuria, Makhachev, John Jones, I'll throw another one, just any big name, that's a casual. And also if they can't name anyone else, like if they can't name any like any fighter like any fighter non-height fighter outside the top 10 or top 15, they're casual. And yeah, that's one of the kind of biggest parts because you'll see people who will only tune into UFC events if it's like Makachev. And a lot of Makachev fans are probably are casuals, just for the fact that, like with when Khabib came around, when Makachev kind of carried on his legacy, especially with a lot of like Hamza as well, a lot of the fans will just tune in because they're like of the same religion. Like that's kind of a lot of how that goes. Because obviously they're very tight knit, all those people. And I get it, but they'd be casuals if they just tune in for those fights. And who else? Now, John Jones. Now, if you're a John Jones fan, you're a future criminal. That's who you. If you're a John Jones fan, you're a future criminal in the making, like him. Well, he's a prior criminal. Yes. So, and then like everyone else, and yeah, if you're not watching any other title fights simply because you don't know who they are, you're a casual. And one of the last points I want to say is calls the MMA the UFC, or calls MMA UFC. So that's probably more one of the more kind of notorious examples. Is that you'll have this guy maybe he just knows what MMA is, but because the UFC is the biggest company, the biggest organization, he calls MMA UFC. He gets mixed up between the two names. The sport is MMA. One of the companies, which as a company organization that hosts MMA fights, is the UFC. It is the most accomplished one. It is the biggest one. Therefore, a lot of people just it's like they kind of synergize the two. They can swap them out, but usually they'll just call it UFC. Because a lot of casual fans will not know what Bellator is. They will not know what Ryzen is. They will not know what ONE FC is. They will not know what's it just I've just forgotten the name of it. PFL. That's the other one. I always get mixed up between PFL and Bellator ever since they merged. I just always call it Bellator. The PFL, the Professional Fighters League, which is like that. Like I never watch it anyway. You don't need to watch them. If you don't watch them, I don't think you're a casual. I just think you're smart because who the hell? Why would you want to watch the PFL? Maybe ONE FC, right? If you watch ONE FC, they're good fights. Don't watch the PFL. The PFL is horrible. It's the most like terribly put together thing ever. It's like the worst organization, and they keep just blowing away money. Anyway, on to why the UFC. I'm actually gonna say why the UFC is the biggest, and why it could get mixed up, because obviously the UFC has the biggest fighter. Han McGregor has all the big names, right? The biggest name in any other organization was maybe, I don't even know. Try to think of who was like big. They're never big because they're never like fighting good fighters. They're maybe kind of big name like outside the UFC, like maybe Umar. No, not Umar. What's the other Nurmagomedov? The one that's currently champ just now. I've just forgot his name. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. Khabib's cousin. But the reason the UFC is the best one is because it is the production. It is the fighters, the production. It's 10 out of 10 compared to all these other organizations. So that is why they're the best. Like, you tune into a UFC event. One of the things that I don't know if never heard anyone say about the UFC compared to other organizations is that in between rounds, they play like every other organization plays like some stupid radio song, like walkout music in between rounds when they're getting the cut man in. And the UFC doesn't do that, and it makes it so much more professional. It feels like whenever I watch one of these kind of shows like PFL or whatever, and they put on in between round, they put on just some random like hip hop song or whatever. It just makes you feel like you're watching some regional thing, and it's like just the most unprofessional thing ever. And that kind of makes me appreciate the UFC more. Obviously, sometimes I'll like criticize the UFC and what they should do here and what should do there. But the production is like 10 out of 10. It's the best production you'll ever find in any combat sports ever. It's so much better than boxing, so much better than any of the other MMA organizations. And yeah, I've kind of went on a bit of a tangent, but that is why the UFC is the biggest. Therefore, that's why casuals will, kind of correlate the two and maybe get mixed up and call it the UFC or call MMA UFC. So yeah. Anyway, that's the video. Bit of a shorter one, but thanks for watching. With this, all this, the Paramount Plus thing coming in, I'm excited for it. The car's in 3 weeks, and yeah, we'll maybe see a lot more, casuals, UFC casuals, MMA casuals in the comment sections, maybe giving their opinion, and maybe you'll see some, maybe down the line, maybe not straight away, but down the line, maybe in like 3, 4, 5 months, you'll see more of them. Maybe people giving, maybe some of your friends will start watching the UFC or whatever. Some of your friends, some of your family might start watching because they already have Paramount Plus, and they might just tune in for one of the pay-per-views. Why is my face cam went all weird? Anyway, so please like, subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.